So I think the experience of joy is an experience when somehow or other we lose sense of ourselves and we glimpse something beyond us. And sometimes that's even in darkness.
Hi, I'm Rachel Bomberger with Eerdmans Publishing. Joining me today is Chris Anderson. Chris is a Catholic deacon, professor of English, poet, and author of the new book, Light When It Comes, Trusting Joy, Facing Darkness, and Finding God in Everything. Welcome, Chris.
Thank you very much.
You have written a book that is about the little moments in life. Why did you feel it was so important to talk about those?
What I'm trying to do in this book is help people remember their moments of joy. We look up at the stars, we hear the voice of someone we love, and something moves in us. There's something happening we can't quite put into words, but we are embarrassed by those moments, we doubt those moments. In the rush of everything that happens, we forget those moments. For a moment, we believe in something, a presence or beauty, but then we let the moment pass. But however small those moments are, however fleeting, that's why I'm interested in these moments, however small they are, however fleeting, this is where God is calling us. And so what I'm trying to do in this book is help people remember. And I do that first by retooling this ancient prayer technique called the examen of conscience. It's really very simple. At the end of each day, you think back on the moments of light and give thanks. You recall the moments of darkness and ask for forgiveness and strength, and then you let it go. You let it go to God. It's prayer as autobiography. That's the small reason why the small moments are important. Yeah. It's prayer as autobiography. And then I tell, the second thing I do is I tell all these stories about myself. The book is really a collection of little fragments and scenes and stories from my life as a husband and a father and a grandfather, and a deacon and a poet and a teacher. And I mean those little scenes and stories to be examples of how the examen works and how it can keep deepening and opening up. And I mean these scenes to be invitations to the reader. I'm saying, do this with your life. Enter into the mystery of your own life, because that's where God is. Not in the big things. Well, in the big things too sometimes. But for most of it, it's this quiet current, this quiet conversation, this quiet sort of stream of joy flowing in our lives, and we don't pay attention to it.
Yeah, and I think joy for you is three letters with a lot of meaning in it. Joy, not in the sense of, happiness or pleasure, but there's something deeper and richer going on in your understanding of joy.
Yeah, very much so. Well, C.S. Lewis wrote the great book on joy, Surprised by Joy. Yeah. He says that joy is deeper than pleasure and deeper than happiness, that joy, even in a sense, can be a kind of grief. Part of what happens in joy is that we are caught up in something that we can't quite control, we don't understand. The very nature of it is that there's something beyond us, and that's frightening. Look at all the stories of theophany in the book of Genesis, for example. Abraham, falls on his face and laughs when God says he will be the father of the nations. Or Jacob is wounded when he wrestles with the angel. These are moments that we resist. In some ways, we think we want joy, but I think one of the reasons we ignore joy is that we don't want it. It's overwhelming. It's not something that we can make happen. The title, Light When It Comes, not light when I produce it.
Right, right.
Or light when I make it happen by being a good person or believing the right things. It's gift. And so I think the experience of joy is an experience when somehow or other we lose sense of ourselves and we glimpse something beyond us. And sometimes that's even in darkness. It's a long tradition. It's scriptural, it's in the monastic and mystical tradition, that darkness teaches us the nature of light. Darkness teaches us that we are not in control. Darkness teaches us that we need grace. So darkness itself is revelatory. Darkness itself is a kind of joy. So in some ways, it's almost as if with the title, my daughter, who is very straightforward with me. Says, well, you write a book about joy, Dad? You write a book about joy? Because she doesn't think of me as a particularly sort of, buoyant person. And so in some ways the word joy is almost kind of misleading. I want people to be happy and I want people to feel joyous in that kind of cliched sense, but then I want, or that real sense, but I want to draw them into something deeper. And to realize that joy is in a sense what they are afraid of.
Yeah. Now, I find it really interesting that you are a poet writing this book, because even though this book is not poetry, there's a lot of poetry in it.
Yeah.
How does being a poet give you a different kind of vision to be able to see and notice and articulate the moments of joy?
Robert Frost said that poetry is what gets left out of translation. And I think that's the nature of religious experience. So, people have known this forever. The psalmists knew it. The gospel writers know it. Jesus knows it. That it's image and story that gets us closest to the mystery. Because in an odd way, what's important about those words is what's between the lines. These essays are collage essays, and there's lots of blank space. And it's the blank space that's as important. That's where we can hear God speak. And I think all poetry involves blank space. Actually, part of what I did with this book is I took the best pieces of my homilies over the years and cut them up into little pieces and spread them all over the study. And then I took my poems, initially as poems, and did the same thing. And then I just started shuffling them around, and then I turned a lot of these poems into prose by taking out the line breaks and then arranging them as paragraphs. Maybe I shouldn't say that, because I think people are intimidated by poetry. They see line breaks and suddenly they're defensive. And what I want to do with these, I think I write a fairly straightforward kind of a poem, is I want to get people deeper than doctrine, deeper than dogma, even though I'm a fan of dogma. I think dogma gets bad press, and doctrine. But I think part of what doctrine and dogma proclaim is the primacy of the image. One of the ways to think about the pieces of this book and about our lives is not with the word poetry, but with the word parable. Parable's a really interesting word. The classic definition is by the New Testament scholar C.H. Dodd, who says that in a parable, the details are very simple, but there's something arresting about them, and they leave us in sufficient doubt about what they point to that we are teased into thought. I love the phrase teased into thought, and I love the phrase sufficient doubt. So in that sense, poetry and parable are in some ways synonymous. And of course, Jesus is the great teller of parables, the great storyteller. And I think our lives are full of these little parables. I think every day is a parable in that sense. I was walking around outside of the motel after I got off the plane to stretch my legs, and there was this really kind of trashy, garbage-strewn swale or little, and I heard a bird singing. I'm interested in birds, and I looked in this trashy swale, and here was a cardinal, which is a very common bird around here. We don't have them west of the Rockies, and it was singing, and I thought, a cardinal in a trashy swale. That's a little parable. These things are happening and what does it mean? Mm-hmm. Well, I don't know, except that I'm alive and the cardinal is alive, and both things are true, the beauty of that song and its strangeness for me, but also the trash and the little ravine.
But if you hadn't been paying attention, you would have totally missed that moment of
right.
a bird singing amidst the trash.
Right, and of course I'm often not paying attention. Often I need a bird to sing loud enough, or I need to be in a strange place, travel, can kind of rearrange our attention or organize our attention. That's what poetry does, I think, or what scripture does, or what a liturgical space does. It organizes attention. It helps us see things, and then it also helps us remember things.
I think it's really interesting the way you tie joy and darkness together,
Mm-hmm.
facing darkness. It's right there. What would you say to someone who says, I don't want to think about the small moments
Yeah.
because they're all darkness.
Yeah.
I look around, I don't see cardinals and trashy swales, I just see trashy swales.
Yeah.
How do you deal with your small moments when you really struggle to find joy?
Yeah. That's really hard. That's really hard. In a way, my book is about that. The first thing that I think of that I wouldn't say, I mean, if you were that person and you were talking to me, I'd be telling myself, a voice in my head would be saying, don't say anything, just listen, ask questions, see what's going on, let the person talk. What I'd be wanting to say is we have to face the darkness, because until we are humbled, until we die to ourselves, we can't rise to ourselves. And so somehow what I would want, I mean, partly what I want to do is get people to see counselors and psychiatrists, take medication if they need it. Sometimes they have to deal with, almost always, with marriages, relationships. There's behavior that's behind this. So there's that kind of hard looking and choice making, but at some point, after I say everything's okay, God loves you just the way you are. You don't have to change. In that sense, God won't love you anymore, but you might love God more. Then at some point say, yeah, but religion isn't just about feeling good. Life isn't just about feeling good. It's the great myths. It's the story of Odysseus. You're called to adventure. And what happens to Odysseus? This is a middle-aged journey, as Joseph Campbell says, so students aren't quite there. He realizes that he is powerless. That's what it means to be a hero, is to realize, to embrace your own insignificance. Then you come back and you try to tell people. And so another way to think about it is that loss and that sense of sadness is a call. It's a call to adventure.
Well, Chris, it has been absolutely wonderful talking with you about this. I know that the book has challenged me to pay attention to the little moments in a way that I don't think I was ever quite aware of before. So I thank you for that on a personal level.
My pleasure.
And thank you for speaking with us today.
It was fun. Thanks a lot.